My name is Neil. I'm the pastor here, and every single service, every message, we start off with some really corny jokes. And I know you really look forward to this. You know, I stopped for about a year doing the corny jokes, and I felt great about it, to be really honest. And then the board's like, we really missed the corny jokes, so you can blame them. My wife bet me $1,000 I couldn't turn spaghetti into a car. You should have seen her face when I drove pasta. Wow. I told you these are corny jokes. I found $20 in a parking lot, and I thought to myself, what would Jesus do? So I turned it into wine. I've been struggling lately to get my wife's attention, so I just sat down, got comfortable, and that did the trick. I started going to the gym to work out because they put a new machine in. After a half an hour, I had to stop, though, because I was feeling sick. But it does everything: Kit Kats, M&Ms, Snickers, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. I never believed in my chiropractor, but now I stand corrected. There you go, for Palmer people. Yeah. Here, we take this because it'll be annoying. You guys doing good today? Good. Have you, how many of you ever been to the Figgy Museum before? Raise your hand. All right, cool. How many of you have ever paid to go to the Figgy Museum? A couple of you. They're closed. No, that's not true. My wife and I go a lot of times, and we tend to go on free day. But, you know, at the Figgy, they do free day all the time. Like, they'll do like 2 or 3 months at a time. It's free day, and so we'll go at free day, and we'll come in, and we'll walk around, kind of check it out, and then, you know, just stroll on down and go and figure out something for dinner downtown Davenport. Like, oh, that was fun. It was a lot of walking. You know, the Figgy costs $41 million to build. $41 million. It's a beautiful building, isn't it? It's like probably the coolest building we have in Davenport, or in the Quad Cities, I would dare to say. $41 million. The operating expenses of it is about $25,000 a week to operate that thing. It has multiple millions of dollars of paintings in it, you know, that you get to go and experience, and you look at them on the wall. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But on free day, it literally takes me 20 minutes. I mean, it really does. I'm being for real. Like, I can get through the whole thing in about 20 minutes and go, okay, what's next on free day? But I have paid to go to the Figgy, and I got all of my money out of it. You know, I stayed there for about an hour and a half. You know, it took each painting, it took a lot more time than I had in the past. Sit there and really enjoy them. I paid good money to be here. How many of you like concerts? You enjoy concerts. All right. I knew you were my people. So the last concert, one of the last concerts we went to was Chris Stapleton at the Mark, or the Vibrant Arena. And my daughter bought us tickets for our anniversary. It was $150 a piece. And they were the very last, we were in the section that was, there's only one section behind us. We were that far away. And they're $150 a piece. So we got there during the opening acts. Right? Because, you know, we paid a lot of money to be there, and somebody paid it for us, and we felt really grateful for that. And so we got there during the opening acts, and they were great. And then Chris Stapleton gets up there and just sings. He's amazing. Beautiful voice. And about, 3 songs into the concert, this girl comes up the stairs and then sits right behind us. This is at Chris Stapleton. He's already been singing for the last, 20 minutes, and she comes up the stairs. And so we turned around and we got a conversation going with her, and she paid $10 for her ticket. We paid $150 a piece. We're talking about my daughter. She's 24 and broke. I mean, this was like her life savings to send mom and dad to Chris Stapleton. And it cost her $10 and it cost us $300. And so during the concert, I mean, she showed up, 3 songs into it, and then she's going back and forth at the concession stand the whole time. And, have you been there before? And you're just constantly, like, oh, this, yep. So it's just her. And and she's just going back and forth at the concession stand. Then by the end of the concert, she's just back there like crying away. And so we talked to her about some other life stuff. And it was interesting, but it just dawned on me in that moment, we paid really good money to be here. We got there for the first 2 opening acts, which were like 45 minutes apiece. And she pays $10. She shows up 3 songs into the main act, and then just goes back and forth in a concession stand and doesn't really enjoy it much. When something's free, we kind of just associate it as a value. It doesn't cost us much, and so like the value of it is free, or maybe got a really good deal on it. And we don't really cherish it. It's not very important to us when it's free. But when something costs us, we really value it, even when we overpay. If you've bought cars in this room, you know what I'm talking about. You really overpay for a car. I got a Nissan Cube, and she's a beaut. But to me, it's important. So I paid good money for it. And I say all this because when you look at the Gospels, when you look at Jesus invites us to put our treasure where our heart is. He says, put your treasure where your heart is. And a lot of times when we hear a teaching like that, it's always financial. Put a treasure where your heart is. And so it's like a financial, okay, wherever you put your money, then your heart will be there also. And I think it's so much broader than that. I think your treasure is your finances, because that does make a big difference. But I also think a treasure is your energy. I think it's your time. How many of you know that we don't have a whole lot of time? Time just flies by, and you're looking at your time and you're going, should I invest in this, or should I just hold on to it for myself? And Jesus says, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Today I'd like to talk about the cost of following Jesus. The cost of following him. There's a passage that I love in 1 Samuel or 2 Samuel that we're going to be looking at today, talking about David and the story of David. And I believe this passage is one of the most overlooked passages in the story of David. And how many of you know the story of David? Like, we could talk about David all of 2025. There's so many stories about David in the Bible, so many great stories that we could apply to our life and really get down and discover more of David's life. But we only have a month to do it. And this is one of the passages that has always struck me in the story of David. We're going to start with David. He's in quite a predicament right now. He's made a mess of being king, and the Lord's angry with the people and also him as a leader. So David took a census of all the warriors that he had to see how big is his army right now. And it came back that Israel has 500 or 800,000 warriors, people that can hold swords, and Judah has 500,000 warriors, pretty big army at this time. And so David takes a census and he hears about how large his warriors and his kingdom is, and it's growing and it's advancing. But David was pulling a census of all the warriors he had. He didn't need to do that because, when the Philistines went to fight the Israelites, it wasn't about their skill set. It wasn't about how skilled they were as warriors. What it was actually about was their God went before them. And so the Israelites would come with the power of God, and God would go before them, he would go behind them, and he would go alongside them. They were the people of God. And everybody else ran in fear, not because of their numbers and not because of their skill. I mean, think about David. Last week, we talked about David and Goliath. David is a little 14-year-old boy with a slingshot and took down a 9-foot skilled Goliath warrior. It wasn't that David was so skilled that he could go and fight that fight. It was that he went in the name of the power of God. And so David goes out there to fight Goliath, and Goliath goes down because God was with David. So David's taken this census of the warriors he has, and so now he's kind of getting off track. Look at how big the kingdom is. Look at how many warriors we have. We could do anything. We could take over the world. David started to forget what got him where he was at. He started taking an account of his treasures. He started thinking about what a great army I have. We got a lot of power in our land. And so David gets the numbers back of how many skilled warriors he has. In 2 Samuel 24:10, it says this, "And David was conscience stricken after he had counted the fighting men. And he said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing." He took an account of all the warriors. It just strikes on his heart. We got so many warriors right now. This land is getting so big. Man, I forgot what got me here. It's always been you, God. This is why I love the Bible, guys. Passages just like that. People making real mistakes and asking for real forgiveness. I think we can all identify with David today, can't we? Made some mistakes. People even tried talking him out of taking a census. David, don't do it. No, I need to know. And so people tried talking about it. I can't tell you how many mistakes I've made where people, really wise people around me are like, that's a bad idea. I don't care what you say. I'm going to do it anyways. But I just love David's heart in this. And I think we've all found ourselves here. Please take away this guilt, Lord. It's too much. I screwed up. So God gives David 3 options to take away the guilt. He says you can have 3 years of famine over the land, or 3 months of running from your enemies, or lastly, you could actually have 3 days of a plague. And so David chooses 3 days of a plague. In the Old Testament, this is how God would work out righteousness and justice. When you read the New Testament, it's a newfound righteousness and justice, which is found in Jesus Christ and on the cross. Jesus took all of that away. So if you think you're walking through 3 days of a plague because of something bad that you've done, I just want you to know that's not biblically correct. There are consequences for our actions. Can I get an amen to that? But Jesus took all on the cross. We get to walk in freedom. But in the Old Testament, this is how it worked. So David chooses 3 days of a plague. So now we have David walking out this mess that he's created in the land, and everybody else is paying the consequences for his actions. 70,000 people actually pass away. We're going to look at 2 Samuel. It says in verse 15, 2 Samuel 24:15. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel from morning until the end of time designated, and 70,000 of the people of Dan to Beersheba died. And when the angels stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, enough. I just want to point out something really amazing in this. Even in the Old Testament, God had mercy. Even though David agreed to this, God's like, that's enough. They suffered enough. Enough. Withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. When David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, I have sinned. I, the shepherd, have done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family. On that day, Gad went to David and said to him, go and build an altar of the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up, and as the Lord commanded him through Gad. When Araunah saw the king and his officials coming towards him, he went out and bowed before the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, why has my lord the king come to his servant? To buy your threshing floor, David answered, so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague of my people will be stopped. Araunah said to David, let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen and burnt offerings, and here's the threshing floor sledges and ox and yokes and wood. Your majesty, Araunah, gives all this to the king. Araunah also said to him, may the Lord your God accept you. But the king replied to Araunah, no, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. Take it all. No, I'm paying you for it because I'm not going to sacrifice something to God that cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord and sacrificed burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings. And then the Lord answered his prayer on behalf of the land, and the plague of Israel was stopped. David builds an altar of the Lord on the place of Araunah's threshing floor, where the angel had stopped, where the Lord had mercy. A threshing floor is a place where you would actually separate the good from the bad with the grain. And a lot of the bad would just float up in the air, and they'd actually grind the grain, and a lot of the good would sit on the ground and still be there, and then a lot of the bad would just float away. And this is the threshing floor that David purchased. So to stop the bleeding of what was happening in Israel, David says, I got to make a change. I got to do something drastic. I got to purchase this threshing floor. And then things will be better. And he pays whatever it costs. Something has to change. I need to make a change. What I'm doing isn't working out. Have you ever been there before? I can remember having our first child, Ariel, and my life, guys, was just a complete disaster. I mean, it really was. I did not have things figured out. I was all over the place. And I knew something had to change. And when I knew it had to change was when I held that little girl in my arms. I was like, why in the world, God, would you give me a little girl? Seriously, it broke my heart that he would trust me with a child. I don't even have myself put together. Like, I can't do this. Something has to change. David says, something's got to change. I got to make a drastic decision right now. I'll purchase the threshing floor. Whatever the price. I want to pay full price for it. I know something has to change. I believe this is a tough concept for us to understand in our multifaceted, consumeristic culture. That something has to change and it's going to cost me. Something's got to change and it may not be free. Yes, the freedom that Jesus offers, the freedom of forgiveness, it's a free gift. That's amazing. The freedom that Jesus offers of being called his sons and his daughters, that's amazing. It's a free gift. The freedom that Jesus offers when you put your hope and your trust in Jesus Christ and you get to live for eternity, it's a free gift. Is that exciting or what? It's free. It's all free, and Jesus did it all. It's all free. But guess what? It costs you your life. It costs us everything. I know something has to change, and I've seen it so many times throughout the years. Like, I know something has to change, and it's not a trial period of trying out Jesus and kind of putting a toe into the Jesus category and adding them into the different gods that we serve. It's all in. I'm all in for Jesus. And it's free. It's a free gift, but it costs you everything. It costs us surrender. It costs us whatever he asks for. It's no longer my life that I get to live, but it's Jesus' life. He lives through me. That means I don't always get my way. It means that I walk through trials that I don't want to be in sometimes, but I'm walking through them with Jesus Christ now. It's a free gift, but it costs. It costs. It costs us everything. And you may be there today where you know something has to change. You may have showed up this morning and man, something has to change in my life. I got to make a change. I don't know what it is, but I know I got to make a change. And God gets us to these points where we're like, you can't do this on your own. That's really, really good because you're at a point in your life where you're discovering that you need God. So David comes to this conclusion, I will pay whatever it costs so I can have this threshing floor. David had it right. I can't offer God something that's not going to cost me something. So this stopped the angel of the Lord's hand on the people of Israel from continuing with the plague. But there's something really interesting because this story is actually in two different books. It's in Chronicles also. And I want to read this same story and see if you can pick up a difference in it. 1 Chronicles 24-23. Araunah said to David, "Take it. Let my lord the king do whatever he pleases. Look, I will give you the oxen and the burnt offerings and the threshing sledges for the wood, and the wheat and the grain offering. I will give all of this." But King David replied to Araunah, "No, I insist on paying you full price. I will not take for the Lord what has cost me nothing. A sacrifice, a burnt offering that cost me nothing." Verse 25, so David paid Araunah 600 shekels of gold for the site. And David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed the burnt offerings, the fellowship offerings, and he called to the Lord, and the Lord answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of the burnt offerings. Do you guys notice anything different with the Samuel version and the Chronicles version? Did anybody else pick up on something in there? Go ahead and shout it out if you picked up on something. Huh? Money. Yeah, the money. So in Samuel, we talked about 30 shekels. And in Chronicles, we talk about 600 shekels. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And it's shekels of silver, and now it turned into 600 shekels of gold. So even back in this time, gold was still more precious than silver. So why do we have Samuel talking about 30 pieces of shekels of silver and Chronicles talking about 600 pieces of shekels of gold? Well, the reason is because David wanted to stop the bleeding, so he bought the threshing floor. Just that. The threshing floor is about from here to those two poles. It's about a 20 square foot area the oxen would actually work, and they would work with the grain, and it would separate the good grain from the bad grain. And so David spent 30 shekels of silver on the threshing floor. He bought that. And that was to stop the bleeding. That was to stop the angel's hand of the Lord. You know what? I've made a big mistake. Something has to change. And I'm just going to stop it right here. I'll purchase whatever it costs. But then David tasted and saw that the Lord was good. He says, I want the whole land. And that's where you get the 600 shekels of gold. So now he buys the entire property off of Araunah. Araunah was going to offer up everything to him. And David says, no, I'm not going to just pay you for the threshing floor. I'm going to pay you for the whole land. And he buys the entire property off of him and spends 600 pieces of gold. And what I love about that is so many times in our life, we come to a conclusion that something needs to change. But things start to get a little bit better when we make some changes. But a life with Jesus Christ isn't just about an initial change and something has to change. And I came to the conclusion, I'm going to try out God, I'm going to try out church. An initial life of following Jesus, that happens. But I'm telling you, it's in the long term when you're pulling out the 600 shekels of gold and saying, I want everything that God has for me. I want it all. Whatever the Lord has for me, I'm willing to pay whatever the cost. In your 20s, yes. In your 30s, yes. In your 40s, yes. In your 70s, yes. In your 80s, yes. It's a lifetime of surrender to Jesus Christ and just continuously paying over and over and over again. Whatever you want, God, I surrender over to you. Jesus says it this way in Matthew 16. He says, then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. When we want to hold on to something that's like, no, that cost me too much, God. I can't surrender that over to you. Jesus says when you hold on to something, you're going to lose it. Whoever holds on to their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life will find it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? Jesus says, I want your whole life. I know things need to change. There's an initial change. There's a drastic change. And we do that and we follow Jesus. And then Jesus goes, you know what? I continuously want your life. Continuously surrender to me. I want the whole thing. What's beautiful about that story of David is the legacy that his son Solomon built the very first temple to the Lord on the land that he purchased in a time of crisis. Jesus wants the whole thing, and he wants to pass that on after generation. I saw what happened. I saw somebody's life get changed, and it changes our life. We hear stories of the people that went before us and following Jesus. We're like, man, I want some of that too. Jesus says, grab our cross, follow his example, deny ourselves. Don't worry about saving your life because it's his now. Put both feet in. What's the Lord been stirring lately? What's been his invite lately? What's God been inviting you? No, will you just trust me in this? I got you. I have you. I'll take care of you. We can never outgive God. Can never outgive him. Just continuously give the Lord our hearts, surrender our lives over to him, whatever it costs, God. I think there's some call of response today. We don't normally do that at this church. But if you know the Lord's just been stirring on your hearts, you know what? I will say, like, from a personal note, one of the main things that following Jesus has cost me is forgiving people. I would love to hold on to really long grudges. I'm really good at remembering stuff, especially grudges. But it's a cost. It's a cross I have to bear if somebody does me wrong, or I at least feel like they did me wrong, and I just go, you know what, God, I got to forgive them. I even say it out loud sometimes. My wife hears it all the time. What's the Lord just inviting you to just surrender today? I think another thing that's been something really hard is surrendering your dreams to God. Because we all have dreams, we all have goals, and then it's like, maybe that was my dream and my goal. Or surrendering the timing of your dreams to the Lord. What is He inviting you into today? I just think that we have an invite to just respond to that this morning. Say, Jesus, I just surrender anew. Surrender my entire life over to you. Whether it's your very first time or whether this is the 150th time of surrendering your life over to Christ. But just to tell Him once again, you know what, Jesus, I just surrender to you. Whatever you want to do with my life, it's yours. It's yours. Can I pray for us? Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Have your way. Lord, I thank you for breaking points in our stories, each one of our stories, Lord, that there was a time where we came to a conclusion of there's just got to be something more. I can't do this on my own. Lord, I thank you for those moments in our life, those times. It just brings us to our knees and come to the conclusion that you're real and you love us. So I thank you for people in this room that are on that journey. Even this morning, maybe it's just a new change of life, a new direction. You know what? I came in searching for God, and the Lord's just been stirring on your heart, and you're just saying, you know what? I do need to make a change. I'll pay whatever it costs, whatever the price is. I'll pay it right now. He can have my life. And Lord, I also thank you for the stories in this room of many of us who have been following you for years and years, and we kind of start taking back our life, and you're just inviting us to just re-surrender everything over to you. Our schedules, our time, our energy, our money, everything that it costs, Lord. Would our hearts just be, whatever it costs, God, I'm willing to give you everything. Would you meet us in this place, Lord? Would you meet us right here, right now? Yeah, I just really feel like there's an opportunity this morning that isn't just like our opportunity, but it's generational opportunities this morning that just like that story of I'm just going to purchase the whole land, and people continued to worship God at that place that David bought for years and years and years. It's just an opportunity for us to just stand on the rock of Jesus Christ this morning and just say, you know what? Whatever the cost is, I'm going to choose to follow Jesus. Whatever that cost is right now, I'm going to choose to follow Jesus. If that's you this morning, I just want to invite you to just stand up. So I just want to pray for you. Whatever the cost is, I'm going to choose to follow Jesus. If that's you, just go ahead and stand up wherever you're at, right here, right now. I'm not going to invite you to come forward or anything, but I do want to just invite you to stand up, just as a declaration, as taking root. Let this would sit in. This would be sealed on our hearts. Whatever the cost is, I'm going to choose to follow Jesus. Not just on Sundays and not on Mondays, but on Friday nights and Saturday nights. Whatever the cost is, I'm going to choose to follow Jesus. When we get invited to other things that will take us away from what we know is following Jesus, that we can just look back at this moment and go, you know what? Whatever the cost was, I choose to follow Jesus. I just want to invite you. If that's you, I just invite you to stand up right now. Whatever the cost is. Lord, would you just be with us? Just be with us, God. Let's just sing this. Lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Stand up. Hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Lay me down, lay me down. I lay me down. Sing it again. Come on. I lay me down.